Walking along a path at the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road toward the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and comparing which one of them received the most rejection letters from agents and publishers. In a corner, by the fire, are three people. One of them insists that he is not bothered by his latest rejection letter. However, he still stares blankly into the fireplace while the whole world melts into an unfathomed abyss around him. And that's me, Matthew Mellema, and welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. The Anselm Society is a coalition of churches across the Front Range of Colorado dedicated to one very simple goal, a renaissance of the Christian imagination. We do all sorts of things to further that goal. The one that is most upcoming is our Imagination Redeemed Conference, which is scheduled for the end of September, and by the time this is posting, it's probably coming up very close on you. So if you did not get tickets, first of all, I am very sorry. Maybe try again next year, and I should have warned you. That's probably my fault. But also, keep a lookout because we like to post a lot of the content online afterwards, so you can still be involved. Find out more about the Anselm Society, visit us at anselmsociety.com, and also maybe rate and review this show while you're at it. We really appreciate it. Helps increase the visibility. You know all of that already. Something you all may not know is something I will just confess here. I hate Instagram. I've tried it several times. I can't do it. I won't do it, but that is something that my co-host today thinks is bad. My co-host is my lovely wife, Danielle. Hello, Danielle.
Hi, hon. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. Happy to have you. So you've been trying to talk me into using Instagram for a while, so
yes, I have.
The microphone is yours. Make your pitch.
Okay, so I'll entitle this in defense of Instagram. I generally find it to be a friendlier place than some of the other online platforms, which
You're
I
saying
shall
my
not.
Twitter account? My Twitter is sort of friendly. Most of the people I follow are friendly. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah, Twitter in general is just a little too aggressive for me, I think. Instagram tends to be a little friendlier, and I think for you specifically, I could see you having a lot of fun with the stories. That gives you more of a chance to add some personality to what would otherwise be a professional writing account, and gives you more of a chance to relate to the people who follow you. And as someone who writes middle grade fiction, the lovely parents of the lovely middle grade children who you want to reach with your books, they are on Instagram. And certainly at that age, I think I'll still have quite a bit of oversight over what our kids enjoy reading and what we read aloud together as a family. And so I think it's the perfect place to share your stories with the people who you want to be reading your stories. That is my conclusion.
Okay, so that all makes sense. I think you probably have the facts right, but I have something beyond facts, and that is my gut feeling.
Oh, okay.
And my gut feeling is I'm already, I have my usual job, the family. I'm writing stuff. I have, other little artistic stuff, trying to keep up with my network. My Twitter account, who's going to complain on my Twitter if I'm not there? And also, when you add in Instagram, I feel like I'm just a little overwhelmed. I feel like you could say I'm drowning a bit. Segue into today. So we are super, super thrilled with our guest today. Our guest is a pillar of the Anselm community. She's been involved with us for a long time. Her kids are also very involved. Her one son, Joel, has been on our board of directors. Her daughter, Joy, is the host of one of our other podcasts, Speaking with Joy. It's great. Check it out. And actually, Sarah and Nathan have both been on this podcast before. So it's really, really great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Sally Clarkson.
Oh, I'm so happy to be with you today. This is really a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely.
I already have 10 opinions about what you just said.
Yes.
But
Oh, man.
I'll share them with you later when this is all over.
I get the feeling you're going to hit me with more of those facts that I want to ignore. But Sally, if the sort of folks who listen to this podcast, what you write about is absolutely in their wheelhouse. But for those who may not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and the sort of stuff you write about?
I'm a mother of 4 children, as you just heard about. And I have been writing for 1,000 years. I'm just finishing my 24th book, and I already have 4 other books on the docket. I care deeply about words and messages and living by words that draw you to your most excellent self. And so that's why I keep writing. And also, we have to pay bills, too. But I'm passionate about purpose and about living into your God-given capacity. I also care deeply about family and place and parents learning to draw the finest parts of their children out in their lives, teaching them to tell a good story. And I'm married to Clay. This will be 40 years this summer. And I just really am privileged to be able to be in the podcasting, blogging, writing world. It's been a real fulfilling part of my life.
Great, and like I said, we are so thrilled to have you on. And what we want to particularly talk about is your latest book, Help I'm Drowning, and some of the implications it has for humans in general, especially those of us who may be parents with kids still in the home, but also for the artists that are listening, because we were talking about this before we started recording. I think there are a lot of parallels you can draw and a lot of lessons here for those of us who are maybe drowning in the arts, whether or not they have Instagram. So let's start with the book in general. Let's talk about Help I'm Drowning. What's it about? What motivated you to write this particular book?
Well, I feel like as I look back, I just turned 68 a couple of weeks ago, and I have had a blessed life. But at this point, I can see that I have had many seasons of doubt, of discouragement, of difficulty, whether it's in parenting, marriage, finances, with other believers, with my art, with whatever. Life tends to have a lot of storms. And I feel like, especially as an artist, I could talk to a lot of storms there too. But I think that the way that a person responds in the midst of a storm determines the legacy of the rest of their lives. And I was sitting on my front porch right at 2 months into COVID, and all of our conferences had been canceled that we were doing for the promotion of another book. And my children had lost their jobs. I had people who had tragic things happening in their lives, and people were sending me letters by the dozens of, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't know what to do with everybody inside my house, life is hard. And I thought, I would love to write a book that talked about, yes, there are storms, yes, there are difficulties, but how is it that some people seem to emerge in their lives from many difficult situations, but with still a sense of purpose and destiny and hope, and some people become victims to the consequences of their lives? And so I wanted to really write a book that would come alongside the people that I mentor and say, this is what I learned, this is how I saw God be faithful, and I want to help you know that struggling is a part of life, but that in your struggles, you actually become the person who has something to write about, who has something of depth to give to other people. But also just that I wanted to kind of come alongside a lot of especially women in my lives who need to know that they're going to make it, that there is a way forward in a very discouraging time of history. So that's kind of a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Danielle, I noticed you nodding a lot to that. So as the mother of 4 young children, I'm guessing you can sympathize with a lot of these themes.
Oh, certainly. We have 4 beautiful children, ages 5 and under.
That's a lot.
That's plenty of kids. That is plenty. And while there are so many joys that come with that, certainly that title, Help I'm Drowning, I think I have maybe uttered those words aloud a few times in the 7 months since our 4th child has been born. And I'm looking forward to this book, and I'm thrilled that you recognized the need to write it, because certainly in motherhood, but just in life as well, there are moments where the storms have clouded our view, and it can feel a little lonely.
Oh, it's very lonely. Yeah.
It can feel like the path ahead, you can't really see what's coming up. You can't figure out how or when you're going to get a chance to
breathe,
to come up for air,
Yeah.
up for air, and to have someone who's been there to say, like, this is the way into the presence of Christ. This is the way, not around, but through these storms, to become more fully who God has made you to be, and to bring that richness that can come from those difficult seasons to the people around you and to further God's kingdom. And so I'm thrilled that you've written this book.
Oh, good. There's so much more now that I look back. I think, oh, I should have written about this, and I should have written about this, because there is no end to the ways that we can be challenged in our lives, is there?
Yeah, and something I noticed, reading some of the things you've had out there about the themes of the book is specifically the role that experience plays in it. And that seems to be something that comes up a lot in your books, but especially this one, where you start off saying, hey, I have these years of experience, I've gone through these other storms before, here's how I can help you. So what about getting through the storms? Do you think it's particularly helpful to have that sort of experienced mentor coming alongside of you?
I think it's so profoundly important, because we were actually made to be people of community, where you knew your neighbors, your grandparents lived near you, your uncles and aunts, your people who were more mature were right along beside you, taking care of your children, bringing you meals, giving you perspective, giving you wisdom. And now we live in an isolationist culture where people are much more subject to social media. Whoever is the loudest voice or whoever they think might be the most authoritative, they tend to feel like, well, maybe that's the person I should follow. Have you ever seen the book, Are You My Mother?
Yes.
Our boys love that
We've
one.
read that many times.
Yeah. Well,
I'll spare you my voice of the baby bird, but
well, I feel like people, in the absence of biblical conviction, I've said many times, people go the way of culture. And so I feel like people are kind of like the baby bird going, are you my mother? To social media. Are you my mother? In other words, are you the voice I should follow? Or are you the voice I should follow? And what I feel like has happened is, because we don't talk a lot about roots and legacy and building a story that can be told for generations to come, people are rootless. They're starting out with no help, no training, no sense of, what am I supposed to do with 4 children, 5 and under, day after day? And there used to be a person who could tell you, or there used to be a whole community of grandmothers or wise women who had been through it. And now I feel like people feel alone, isolated. COVID certainly added to that. And then, so what do they have to help them? They go to the internet. And there's a lot of fools on the internet. And if you follow a fool, you will have devastating circumstances in your life. So I'm not perfect. I have not had a perfect life. That's part of my message. But if there's something I can do to mentor and help other people who are in that place, I want to go before them, say, you can do it. This is what I learned. Don't make the same mistakes I made. But it is possible to live in your potential, to access your muscle, so to speak.
Yeah, and you touched on a theme that's been really important to a lot of us folks in the Anselm Circle recently. I think I mentioned on this podcast, but Anselm in this upcoming season, we really want to focus on the concept of story, of finding our place in the great story, and also just really emphasizing the stories we tell to each other, the stories we learn from, that we're enriched by, and also the stories we tell to ourselves. And it really seems, from what I've seen about your book, that seems to be a really powerful thing. It's, first of all, hearing your story as someone who's experienced it before, but also learning from each other's stories and seeing, oh, I'm not the only one who feels this way. Oh, this might be a normal thing to feel. Oh, here's a way to situate what I'm going through right now in the broader story of my life and of, the life of the church, the life of the universe. So it really seems, Sally, you can just admit it, did you write this as part of a joint cooperation with the Anselm Society? And if so, thank you.
Well, I do. I learned from my husband. We have written many books together and apart, but I think that sometimes I just want to lecture. This is what I know, and this is what you should do. And then I began to realize that over 800 times in Scripture, God mentions the heart. And I realized that Jesus told stories, that the whole Old Testament is stories, and that there's something that captures our imagination when we can see beauty, depth, wisdom, see circumstances, and then we can learn from truth. And so I do feel like one of the things I learned along the way is that my story, anybody's story, whatever your story is, becomes the platform for you to speak into the lives of people who have a similar story. And so I think learning how to make your story a place of wisdom is something that really needs to happen. But I do think that our stories are our place where we have the most integrity because it's what we've lived.
That's a good way to transition now into talking about artists in particular, because it does seem like there's a lot of parallels here between the insights you have for young parents or parents with children who feel like they're struggling and folks who are artists. And some of us maybe both, so we're double drowning. So Danielle, I know you have talked about this too, because let the listener understand, Danielle has been doing a lot of writing herself, and it's been getting more buzz than my writing, which I'm totally okay with, and I'm not jealous at all. But Danielle, I've just seen you feel this sort of tension between like, oh, here's this responsibility I feel I have. I really want to get this writing done, but do I want to, then the whole back and forth. So how does that play out for you?
Well, I mean, everyone's life has competing priorities, whether they would call themselves artists or not, whether they're parents or not. But certainly in my life, I want to be faithful to use the giftings that God has given me to bless the people around me, to build up His church. And I also feel the very immediate pull to do that to the people who are most close to me, which is my family. And sometimes it's not always clear how those priorities fit together. And then when you layer on top of that, just a difficult life circumstances, it's hard to know with your limited self how you can speak into all of those areas and how you can pursue the things that really do bring you a lot of joy that you feel particularly suited for or made for, such as writing or music or visual art in some way. And so I guess, Sally, I would just be curious what your encouragement could be to the artist who has competing priorities in their life, who cares deeply about their craft, but maybe feels a little depleted as they just continue to weather the storms in their life.
Well, I'm going to, there's so many things I could address right now, but I think one of the first things that I have said to both artists and just parents or just people who are going through storms, you have to really manage your thought life. You can't listen to the voices. This will never happen. I will never be okay. Life will never change. I am not good enough. Those kind of voices attack all of us. Sometimes I think we are our own storm, if that makes sense. And I think for an artist, you have to believe forward in what God has made you to do and how you're becoming. I think that sometimes with artists, they tend to measure themselves or the success of what they do by whether or not they get published in music or in a movie gets picked up or a book gets picked up. But what if God made us as writers, communicators, and I think this is how all people who eventually flourish start out, to look for places in the normal moment of your life where you are, to keep a journal if you're a writer, because you're learning messages every day. You may not be able to write a book about it, but I think making a journal a place where you can write down the thought you've had, the beautiful thing you want to paint, whatever, you need to be recording, you need to be growing all the time. Also, I do think that as I look back on my life, I have always been driven to become a message maker. Now, if I had helpers, if I had a maid, and if I had an assistant that could do all the busy work, and if I had somebody who could have done all these other things, I could have written much finer books. I could have crafted, because I would just be sitting, sipping my mint julep and pondering life, But I think that you do what you can at the moment. Like a lot of people wait until they work on something, or they wait until somebody contacts them. Nobody's ever going to contact you. And I think that as I look back in my life, because writing was an element that was important to both Clay and me, maybe, and every Saturday morning, he would take the kids away. We planned our lives to give us each a possibility of being able to do some of the work that was important to us. So there was a time when I wrote. Other people might have gone out with their friends for coffee. I stayed at home and wrote. So I made a tiny little place, a Saturday morning, where I would sit by myself. I wouldn't clean house. I had to resist all the things that were waiting for my attention. And Clay has always been good to help me with that. But that's when I would work on my messages. That's when I would write in my journal. And so if you are an artist, you can always not always, the first few weeks of a baby's life. No, just give it up.
Yes.
And then write down, like at week 8, what you learned. But we always scheduled our lives in such a way that we had a little bit of time to work on what was priority to us. So I think, and you're learning things right now with 4 children that you never knew before. You're learning limits. You're learning humility. You're learning that you can't meet every need. You're learning that every child has a personality, and that would say to you with adults. Adults have personalities. I need to take adults in context. So you're learning a lot right now. You're living what your message will become. And I think that's really important, because I think some artists, of course, you dream, and it happens rarely that the 20-year-old gets the contract of their lifetime. But what usually happens, I always say to people, don't make the pinnacle of your life when you're 18 years old. I think artists and writers and musicians, you should be getting better and better every year. You should walk into heaven with the most wisdom and the most craft you've ever had in your whole life. And so it's a gathering of wisdom. It's a gathering of messages. It's a gathering of what beauty you want to leave in the world. The second thing I would say, that's probably the third or fourth thing, I don't know. But use your art right where you are in your home. If you're a poet, write it. If you're doing stories, one of our friends that you've also had at Anselm, Sam Smith, for years he was telling his stories to his children way before he ever decided to self-publish. And so I think use the moments where you are, do it, and have a neighborhood tea every year where you say, whoever feels like they want to share their gift, or, for your Anselm friends, and create places where you can actually use the brilliant ideas that you have. And then I have something else to talk about in a minute, but go ahead with your next question.
Oh, absolutely. And you brought up a lot of stuff that's really resonating with me. One of the things that you said that really hit home was managing your thoughts, because that is so easy to grasp objectively, but then when you're in the midst of it, it's so hard, because I mention this all the time on the pod, sorry. So I have my manuscripts. I'm trying, doing the agent thing, and I talk about this with all the other writers in Anselm who are doing the same thing. You always know, hey, the odds of any particular agent accepting you are minuscule. You're going to get rejected a ton. Just know it and move on. Okay, objective me says that, and then I get the rejection email. It's like, no, woe is me. Then I spiral, and usually I can come out pretty soon, but Danielle, you can attest. I had a couple times when I stayed up late at night self-medicating with a bag of potato chips and questioning whether it was worth it all.
Potato chips.
Yeah, that you can tell how sad I am by how many potato chips we have. If it's just empty potato chips,
that's a good measure.
It's been rough. But how do you, again, this is a sort of thing where if you are an artist, it's inevitable. This thing is going to happen. So what are the ways you can prepare yourself for that and to keep this obstacle from becoming something that causes you to spiral out of control?
Okay, I feel like I am not exceptionally gifted, and I feel like maybe God went to 50 people before me and said, who is going to inspire, challenge, train, develop families, women, and the other ones all had qualifications. Well, it's too hard. I can't do it. This isn't the right time. I need someone else to do it. I need someone else to help me. And he went through all 50 of these people. And then he got to me and he said, well, Sally, you're not my first choice, but you're available. And so I feel like I am, when you read the passage about God wrestling with Jacob, and Jacob didn't let go. And I feel like a lot of people are, they're idealizing art. And they're thinking it just happens. No, it doesn't. It's hard work, and it's also a business to the people who you're going to, whether it's an art show or it's a publisher or it's somebody who does music. You have to do the hard work of the business. So sorry, you have to do something like Instagram because what you have,
thank you
in the thoughts of your mind. It doesn't matter if you're the best writer in the world. If you can't convince an agent and the publisher that they're not going to lose money on you, because publishers aren't doing great right now. I mean, a lot of people almost went under during COVID. And so what you have to understand is it's not just your craft. It's also you have to be doggedly committed and willing to work hard at building up a tribe. You don't have to reach everybody in the world, but who are you writing to, and how are you ministering to those people faithfully? Because if you are developing wisdom, you're developing a message, you're getting better at your craft, but you have a heart for your tribe, it's not just I'm writing, but it's I really want to help these people, then you're going to be involved in going towards those people in a place where they can be reached, making yourself available, even if it's starting out at your church with a bunch of junior high kids. But in some ways, it's the person who's dogged, the person who is wise enough to read what the business aspects say, because I feel like I've known so many very talented people, but they didn't understand the hard work of you have to play the game in a way. And I'm not saying compromise yourself, but Clay and I, the first conference that we had, we just started reaching out to people, was 11 people. It wasn't 1,000 people. It was 11 people. And then eventually a couple of them went out and they said, you really need to hear them. And so then it was 25 people. And then, do you see what I mean? And sometimes I feel like we idealize the old days when artists just happened, but even in their day they were exceptional because they held fast, they believed in their message. And boy, I can tell you the world needs really wise artists, intentional artists, hardworking artists. Your messages are needed in the mental game. You have to put in that place, I believe that God has given me a gift for his glory. If I do it for one person or a million, it doesn't matter. I am going to doggedly pursue excellence and putting myself out there and learning what it means to develop my tribe.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That really does, really does. And as you were talking, something that was striking me is, do we as artists really believe that our work is important? Like, is it helpful? Is it a gift that we have an obligation to share? And if so, we should be prepared to do the parts of the work that aren't fun.
Oh my gosh, yes. Most of, all of my kids know, all of them are published writers now, but all of them say, does anyone know how much work this is?
I think it's very easy to give yourself the veneer of being like a purist to your art. It's like, I'm going to write exactly what I want to write, and that's the end. But it's really got under the guise of, well, I'm just going to do the fun stuff, and I'm not going to do the stuff I don't like. So,
well, and I have something else to say.
Go right ahead.
Oh no, is this Instagram?
No, it's not Instagram. The wise people copy wise people. And to be the best artist or the best anything that you need to be humble enough to learn. And I have learned so much. I will even I've had editors who have flown out here or my agents or whatever. I'll say, how do you think I need to improve? Or where was I not clear? Because every artist can perceive this great idea that seems so obvious to them, but then getting it out on paper or on a canvas or on it takes practice, it takes wisdom. Copy the wisest people you know.
I think there's so much importance in doing your art in community, which is one of the reasons that we are so passionate about the work of the Anselm Society. But I think the same can certainly be said of walking through trying times in your life. It's never meant to be done alone. And when we were on our way over here, we asked our 4-year-old, we told him what we were going to be talking about today, and asked him if he had any questions for you. and he said that when he is feeling overwhelmed or sad, he likes to go somewhere by himself and have a snack. And so I guess our question for you then, are there any rhythms or practices that you have built into your life, but also like in your life as you are an artist in community that help you when those difficult times come, whether that's in your life or in your craft, or, you know, when the difficult times kind of collide and it just seems like nothing's going right. So how do you maybe even prepare for those times when times are good? Because it's not all bad, you know?
No.
So when times are hard, like what practices help you, and then how do you carry that into those difficult times? And it's okay if your answer is you go somewhere by yourself and have a snack.
I was going to say, I like what he said. I love food. Food is food and drink. No, I think that most of life is hidden. I wrote about that a couple of weeks ago. Most of life is in the meantime. And so the rhythms that you are practicing every day, like there are a few exciting events in a year, a few. But whatever you're practicing in the meantime is what you're becoming. So I would always say that an artist or just a mom, because life is draining you every day, all the time, 24 hours a day, regularly, if you don't put in rhythms in your life of building back up, of pouring into your own life, then you will start becoming angry, frustrated, depressed, overwhelmed. And something that I realized way too late was I kept thinking that if I was really that exhausted, somebody from outside was going to come to my life and say, "Oh, bless your heart, you're so tired, let me help you." And it never happened. And so unless I have a hip issue, I walk twice a day. I was walking 5 to 10 miles a day because I love being out in nature. That's a lot of times where my thoughts come. And when my children were little, I plied all of them in a stroller or made them, and I would go on a walk because being out in nature really helped me. So exercise is one of the things I do every day, no matter what. Every morning when I get up, I light candles, I have flowers in my house, I put on music, and I sit with my Bible and my journal. And sometimes I just sit, and I'm not very profound in my thoughts, but it is my way to enter my day. And I always have about 4 or 5 books going, even if it's a paragraph. I read, I give my day to the Lord. But if you picture a house that's being built, it's built by thousands of bricks. And the habit of reading and having a quiet time is you're building an estate one brick at a time. And so without the habit of when are you going to read, or when are you going to have a quiet time, when are you going to pray, you can't have depth of beauty in your art if you aren't building beauty into your soul. And so I even if I had to get up 30 minutes, an hour earlier, I did that. I used to do it. I can't do it anymore. But I would get up sometimes at 4:30 in the morning in order to have my cup of coffee all by myself that no one else sipped.
Oh, I understand that.
No one else sipped, and to have my very civilized moment. It means I would go to bed when the kids went to bed. Like I said, every Saturday morning I had my time off. Eventually, there was one year when we lived right around the corner from a French cafe. And Clay said, "I will go to my office at 8 o'clock. Whatever you want to do before then, you do, and I'll take care of the kids." So I would go have my own piece of quiche, my own cup of coffee, and that's when I wrote my first book. Wow. It was in that hour, because usually it took me, a few minutes to get there, a few minutes to eat, and then I would write. But for a couple of mornings a week, because we had scheduled it in. You have to schedule what you want to do. My daughter Sarah's at the same place as you right now. She has another book contract, and she said, when I can hire somebody to be here for 3 or 4 hours, I just go straight to work for that 3 or 4 hours a week. So as an artist, maybe that's going to keep you alive. I also am guilty of listening to Audible all the time.
Yes, you're in good company.
That's right.
So,
we're an audible household.
Yeah, so whether it's in the car, whether, I'm always taking in input. These days, because I consider my children my best friends and mentors, I make an effort, like I've already talked to 3 of them today, to say, what are you reading? How are you doing? What are you learning? And I find some people in your life. I used to have a mentor who's quite old now, but I made it a point to meet with her at least once every 2 weeks, because I knew that when I was in her presence, she would call me to my best self. So find either a podcast or a real life person who speaks into your life in such a way. But it's a number of rhythms like that. But I plan them and put them in my schedule, and nobody can bother them unless it's an emergency or flu,
I love that, and made me think of a couple things that I think are connected here. First off, I remember back in college in our writing classes that we would do is that one of the points that my professor made was that if you want to be a writer and have stuff to actually discuss, you need to love something besides just writing, because if you only love writing, you don't have anything to write about. So she encouraged me, like, hey, Matt, you like dinosaurs. Learn more about dinosaurs and write about them. Or, go on nature walks, go to the museum, be curious. So that's all part of it. And something related to that, first of all, I share your love of audiobooks. And I almost always have one going in my spare time. One I was listening to, I don't know about you, I always listen to the books on double speed.
Oh, do you know? I'm kind of can't. Okay. I don't know what's wrong with me.
You just want to savor it.
No, it's probably something wrong with me.
I'm ADD. We all know this in my family.
So I usually listen to the books on double speed, and Danielle thinks I'm crazy too. It's like something that makes
you
you feel...
can. That's great.
Well, but this one, it was a book by N.T. Wright about virtue, and I slowed it down to normal speed to make sure I could get it, because his point was, talking about, classical virtue in the ancient world, and how, the Apostle Paul sort of took that and adapted, but also turned it on its head in some ways. He's talking about how the idea with virtue is it's 1,000 little hard decisions you make.
Yes.
Sort of hidden aspects of life that you were talking about. The things you're never going to remember. You won't remember a week from now. But added together, that's what builds you into the virtuous person, or it's what builds sort of life that would lend itself to the art you want to do. It's all these little tiny things.
Yes.
The importance of the habit for those.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't God's word say that as well? He who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. There is a cumulative effect to the way we order our days, and I think that shows up in life and in art as well.
Well, and getting back to the storms, when I was a new Christian, I said, God, I'll go anywhere, do anything. And then, in the context of life, terrible things started happening. And I would look at the storm as a bad thing, or why is this happening to me? I'm out of control. And as I look back now, God said, well, I'm so glad that you're willing to obey me and to grow. And so I see how he used all of these very difficult things, like you said, the little steps. I learned one lesson here and one lesson there, and I realized that I wasn't really prepared to change the world yet, because I hadn't, as you said, I hadn't had enough steps of building my virtue. And so I feel like storms are about learning about the fallen world, learning about other people's suffering, learning about what it looks like to be courageous, learning. And so my storms, as I looked back, were the very places where the decision I made in that point built virtue or didn't. And as I was building virtue by being obedient, then my messages became more meaningful. So it's just what you said. Just what you said.
Yeah, there's a writer that I've really learned a lot from. Her name is KJ Ramsey, and she wrote a book recently called This Too Shall Last. And I feel
that's
like
wonderful.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
And I think for me, that phrase has really meant so much to me, because I think a lot of times in a genuine, kind effort to comfort, people say, oh, this too shall pass. And I think for me, who's a little bit pain averse, I would always think, okay, well, could it just go ahead and pass then? But the phrase, this too shall last, I think is a reminder that even in the very hard things, God is building up something of value and beauty that will last into eternity. There's not a difficulty that he cannot transform for his glory and to further his kingdom I think for me, that has really increased my endurance in times of
So
trial.
true.
Maybe that phrase will be helpful to someone. And if you want to read the book, that's This Too Shall Last by K.J. Ramsey. And it's really a
Sounds
lovely
wonderful.
book. It's really beautiful. And she has lived the messages that she has written about, just like you have in your book, Sally. And I would recommend that.
Well, I was just reading it, just on an arts point of view, and then I'll hurry. But I was just reading a story about Michelangelo, and when he painted the Sistine Chapel, which is, of course, we all know where God is touching Adam. You know, we see these beautiful pictures, but it took him 4 years. He was on his back, paint splattered into his face every single day. There was bacteria that started growing on the ceiling. You know, I mean, he's such a picture of sometimes art might take a while, but in the end, there is something beautiful.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to something you mentioned earlier, Sally, but it's the mentality of growing through it. And I think especially for artists, it's very easy to fall into the trap of, well, I'm an artist. I'm talented. I have this gift. So either people recognize it right away and I'll be rich and famous, or I don't have the gift, in which case I'll, soothe myself with bags of chips. But the harder thing, and for me, even though I'm saying this right now and I believe it, I can guarantee I'm going to fall into this trap later. The hard thing is knowing, okay, my art isn't where it needs to be right now, so I should keep working on it and keep growing as an artist, keep growing as a person. Then maybe down the road it'll be something, and that is so hard to do.
But you know what? I just look at you all. You look so lovely today, and you have 4 kids, 5 and under. And I think the fact that you have committed yourself to keep having kids, the fact that you are still alive,
We're doing it.
The fact that you have such eloquence in what you're saying, to me says you've already learned. I am going to make this. I'm going to gather. I'm going to become wise. I mean, I already see that in your lives. So, no, I really mean it. You can kind of tell when someone's on the road to, I can do this.
Yeah, I really like the image you gave of Jacob wrestling the angel, because what did he do? He held on.
He held on, yeah.
That's one of the lessons. And again, it does not come naturally, but it's so important.
No.
Yeah, so something related to that, and I think it does come back to the storms. And as you're talking about the storm, Sally, I was thinking about the parable of the sower and the seeds, where some of the seeds it gets burned up, some of it gets swept away, and it seems like one of the implications there, that's going to happen. The sun's shining down whether you're on the good soil or the bad soil.
Right.
The difference is the outcome. And the outcome is whether, like you said, Sally, you're rooted in the right things, or whether you're just sort of off trying to do it on your own. Yeah, there's just so many strands here. So I guess what I would say then, trying to bring this around full circle, we are running a little low on time, but what would be your final thoughts to folks who are trying to balance all these other things and their art? Like, you already gave us some practical advice, but what would be like your final charge to someone's like, I have this and this and this, and also my art, which is super hard, and there's aspects of it I don't like, and it hasn't gone anywhere yet. And what would you say to that person?
I would say keep your priorities your priorities. You look at Nehemiah, and Nehemiah was building back the wall of Jerusalem. They had to have protection. They had to have stability. And then with one hand, and then with the other hand, they were fighting against the people who were trying to destroy them. And I would say, number one, always focus primarily at first on the people that God has entrusted in your life. You have to take care of relationships, and relationships are where your virtue is going to come from. So I would say plan your life around how you can best take care of your relationships. You can't be a good artist and drop your relationships. Your children, your children, your friends, your parents. It's in the context of being a servant leader to them, as Christ was, where you really build your virtue. But then roll up your sleeves and say, and I really feel like maybe my art can bring light to the darkness, beauty to people who need it. And do what you need to do to find some time to work on that. I feel like there's never been a time, God has entrusted these dark times to us. What if he born us into these times because he trusted that we would be the ones who would fight hard, who would love well, and who would put our art into the world so people could have hope? What if he said, I know that I can trust you and you and you to be those people who it might require a little bit more, it might require strength. So I would say, in your heart, believe, work hard, take care of relationships, and then bring light into a dark world.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Well, that's a perfect thing to close on. Sally, once again, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom here in the podcast. Really appreciate it. And again, for folks who may be coming to you more on the newer side, where can we find you? Where can we find your books? When can we find out officially about Help I'm Drowning?
Well, you can get Help I'm Drowning at any normal bookstore or order it on Amazon, whatever. You can find all things me at sallyclarkson.com, my podcast At Home with Sally, and my Instagram at sally.clarkson.
There you go. Instagram,
just my blog at sallyclarkson.com.
All right, great. Well, thank you once again. And, well, folks, as you can tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Digital Pub. The fire's down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.